I'm a security guard in a small city that's infamous for its meth and homeless problem. This is something I'm not supposed to talk about, so all names and locations have either been changed or omitted. I'm the FTO for my site, so I have contact with the other officers throughout the day in case they have any questions or need additional training on different things. Mostly, when I'm patrolling like any other security officer, I'm reviewing other officers' reports and looking for ways to improve safety habits and whatnot. It's a pretty cushy gig, I have to admit. Unfortunately, my site has had a pretty major problem this last week. We've been dealing with this particularly dangerous transient for some time, who some of the part-timers have now dubbed the Slasher. I try to discourage this, since it kind of blows things out of proportion giving the guy a nickname. It's not like we had a Zodiac killer coming out on the property or anything. Basically, there's this guy. He's been described as late 20s or early 30s, wearing a hooded jacket, and he's been ambushing guards on foot patrol with a knife on 2 prior occasions over the past week. He sits behind a dumpster or a wall, and when the guard on patrol walks by, he jumps out and attacks. Luckily, no one has been seriously hurt so far, though one of the part-timers received some minor scratches where the tip of the blade barely pierced inside his jacket, and he broke his wrist when he tried punching the guy, missed, and hit a cinder block wall behind him. Still, he was extremely lucky. This Slasher, or whatever you want to call him, apparently isn't much of a fighter, since he always runs off as soon as his target starts fighting back. He also hasn't managed to do any actual slaying yet, but I'll admit, the fact that he's tried more than once is worrisome from a security standpoint. Unfortunately, the police in this town are slow and kind of useless, and 12 minutes is about the fastest police response I've ever documented at this site, even though the station is literally 2 blocks away. So when the Slasher hasn't been successful in his slashing, he's always managed to escape before the police show up, so he remains at large. I should mention, this is strictly an unarmed post. We're not allowed to carry handcuffs, client's orders, so there's not much we can do in these situations but try to defend ourselves with bare hands and hope that the police arrive in time. They never do, of course, so really, there's nothing we can do about it but hope our luck holds out. I'm not supposed to say things like this, being the FTO, but it's true. So, I mentioned I normally work swing shift, which is around 15 through 2300. Today, I was working graveyard, which is 2300 through 0700 hours. The graveyard officers work completely alone. There isn't even a dispatcher on duty. We have the guard wear a radio so it doesn't look like he's alone, but on graveyard, you're unarmed, have no backup, and you're expected to spend most of the shift on exterior patrol. The director assigned me to the shift a couple of days a week. Even before the Slasher, we started seeing an unusual number of incidents in this one particular part of the property during graveyard hours, and the director wants me to study the situation and help him come up with a plan for how to improve security during these hours. Now, that guy who injured himself fighting off the Slasher, he was working swing at the time, and this took place back on November 20th, and what he had went through only happened a couple days prior, so the incident had played pretty heavily into my patrols the last couple of days. When the guy was attacked, the Slasher had jumped out from behind a couch, which one of our tenants had leaned against a cinder block wall to one of the dumpsters. I had made a note of that earlier in the day, suggesting that the careless placement of the couch had given the Slasher an opportunity to hide and ambush the guard, and that security should advise the tenant of this and demand a more orderly use of the dumpster area. I know, I sound like a douche, but it's my job. So, when I inspected the area, the couch was still there, but it was sitting flat on the ground and backed all the way up against the wall, so no one could hide behind it. When I saw this, I took a picture and made a note that this is exactly how the dumpsters should be kept, and that security should insist that it stays this way. Again, a professional douche. I went on with my shift, patrolling in the security vehicle most of the night, then took off hoofing it at about 0300 so that I could check the building's interiors and some of the less accessible areas more thoroughly. At 0330, I was in the vicinity of the aforementioned dumpster when I had this instinct that I should go check it out. I peeked around the corner and immediately noticed a pile of plastic sheeting on one of the couches. It hadn't been there on my previous patrol, so someone must have been there since I last checked. Now, I wasn't feeling any anxiety at this point. On its own, it was just some suspicious trash, likely evidence of a late-night dumpster diving, or maybe an already vacant transient camp. Still, given the ongoing situation, I've been encouraging the other guards to contact the police as soon as something seems out of place, rather than waiting for the situation to unfold. It's safer that way, since hopefully the police can help before it's already too late. I made a quick call to the police, telling them I found evidence of a transient on property in the same location where one of my coworkers had been assaulted the other day. They knew what I was talking about, and they said they would send an officer immediately. Now, I don't want to go charging into a potentially dangerous situation, but waiting around for 15 minutes for police to show up felt like a waste of time, so I decided to carefully investigate. I slowly entered the dumpster stall and stopped short of the plastic. I listened and didn't hear any movement or breathing. I carefully lifted the plastic to see what was underneath. I was surprised to find a red, Next brand bicycle. One of the reports of the slashers referred to a bike of this description. Now, the anxiety was beginning to rise. This was likely Slasher, and this camp wasn't abandoned. There was no sign of him, but he must have been nearby, and clearly he planned to return. I decided to hurry my investigation up and hurry the fuck out of there, then wait for backup from the police before doing anything else. However, I noticed something that convinced me to stick around for just a bit longer. There was a small messenger bag hanging from the handlebars. It had a name on it in black marker. Murphy was all that I could make out. I had just barely lifted the plastic, and it was too dark underneath to read the last name. This may have very well been the slasher's real name on his own property. I had to lift the plastic further to see what was there. I drew the plastic sheet back a little further, then froze. There was another layer of plastic, another form behind the bike. I also realized that the couch had been moved slightly away from the wall. I cursed out loud for not noticing it sooner. I couldn't see clearly under the second sheet, but I could make out the shape of a hood. I was leaning in, face to face with the slasher himself. I heard him inhale sharply, then he shifted. In one quick motion, I stepped back and kicked the bike forward. I heard a man grunt as the bike fell against him. It was really narrow in the dumpster stall, and footing wasn't entirely stable because of all the boxes and other trash stacked up against the dumpster itself. In short, it was a terrible place for a fight with an armed psychopath. While the slasher thrashed his way out from behind the couch, I withdrew around the cinder wall to the parking lot just outside. That way, I'd have room to move around and stay safe out of reach of his weapon, and the police would be able to see us as soon as they drove up. I stood my ground in the parking lot, standing in what police and security would refer to as a ready stance. I was standing upright, hands at the ready in front of me, light on my feet so that I could either stand and fight or retreat as the situation dictated. I pulled out my just-for-show radio and called out, "Code 3, 1199 East Exterior Parking Lot." The slasher rounded the corner and just stood there, staring at me. He was wearing a dark green jacket with a Velcro strap over his jaw. He was standing in the dark side of the stall with his head turned down. I couldn't see his face at all, just darkness under that hood. In the previous encounters with the slasher, none of the other officers got a good look at the knife. The reports always said, a sharp object, possibly a knife. I got a good look of it now. It was long and thin, kinda like a fillet knife. There were brown stains on the blade that I hope was rust. "Backup's coming," I shouted. "PD's on the way." He cut to his right and picked up his bike. I didn't advance to stop him because there was only one way into the stall, and I wasn't about to charge against that knife. He mounted his bike and skidded off the sidewalk, swerving wide around me to take off across the parking lot. I followed him on foot, not running straight at him, but more alongside and a good distance away so that I would have time to react if he turned suddenly to cut me off. He gained too much distance, with him being on a bike and me on foot. He rounded a corner towards the main road where there were several side streets, an alley, and a parking lot to another property. By the time I rounded the corner, I couldn't be sure what direction he'd gone. PD arrived about 14 minutes from when I called. My city's finest for you. I've scheduled an appointment with the director to discuss the ongoing situation. It disturbs me to know that this guy is trying to ambush security officers. It's like he's working up his confidence with these ambush attempts, and it's only a matter of time before he perfects his technique. I hope I've seen the last of him, but I have a feeling he'll be back. I'll be back on work on Tuesday, and I'll be paying very close attention to my surroundings. This situation is ongoing, so I'll keep you up to date if anything changes. I can only end this by telling everyone to stay safe out there. Watch your surroundings, and never get complacent. Something that seems innocuous can actually be a knife-wielding psychopath hiding under your nose like a ninja stage magician. If you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate if you'd leave a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe for future content. If you would like a chance to have your story featured in an upcoming video, make sure you check the description for information on how to submit your stories. And if you would like to head over to the Urmaker Militia headquarters, we now have a website. It is urmakermilitia.com. It's still a work in progress, but it's coming along very nicely. And if you would like to send in some fan art, feel free to email it to me, and I have a spot on the website for fan art. I hope you all have an awesome day, and hopefully the background noise in this doesn't fucking suck. It's spring break right now in Lake Havasu, so you're talking about everyone coming from across the country during their spring breaks to come down here and party, and no one shuts the fuck up. I sat there till like 4 in the morning waiting to record. They're like, no, we're gonna fucking scream all night. So I waited, and they're still screaming. Hopefully you don't hear it. And enough for my ranting. I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you in the next video. And just remember, it's always scarier if it's true.